Good evening and welcome to the bar. Tonight we're going to do something a little different. I'm not going to mix you a particular cocktail, but instead walk you through one particular spirit. And what better spirit to start with than gin? Before there was gin, the Dutch distilled another juniper-based spirit known as Jenever. In English you might call this Jenever or Jenever. You can still buy it today in both an old style and a more modern style that is closer to gin. This drink was originally given to Dutch troops as a medicinal ration and gained popularity among English troops when fighting Louis XIV of France. By the time William of Orange became King of England, a shorter name, gin, was being used by the English soldiers. It is also responsible for the term Dutch courage, as a shot of Jenever before battle gave the Dutch soldiers courage to fight. It was in London, though, that gin found its home. With lax distillation laws in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, the British capital experienced a gin craze, and London dry gin was eventually born. Cheap, readily available gin led to drunkenness in the streets, as well as underage drinking. As gin fully took its hold, gin joints allowed women to drink alongside men, and it was thought that this led to mothers abandoning their children and earning it the nickname Mother's Ruin. At this point, the equivalent consumption was 2 pints of gin for every Londoner. William Hogarth created a set of prints called Beer Street and Gin Lane at this time to showcase the evil of gin compared to the happiness of beer. The continuing gin craze was having negative effects on the local populace, with rising crime and violence leading to a movement to stop the prevalence of gin. The following poem, by Townley, was presented with the print to help convince people to change the law. Gin, cursed with fury fraught, makes human race a prey. It enters by a deadly draught and steals our life away. Virtue and truth, driven to despair, its rage compels to fly, but cherishes with hellish care theft, murder, perjury. Damned cup that on the victuals preys, that liquid fire contains, which madness to the heart conveys, and rolls it through the veins. To crack down on the evils of gin, the government tried passing multiple laws. It wasn't until the so-called Gin Act in 1751 that they managed to curtail the problem. It prohibited selling to unlicensed merchants and put restrictions and high prices on retail licenses. As an alternative, tea was encouraged, as was beer drinking, for men. Gin, however, began to be exported to the world on the back of the British Empire and the British Navy. Despite the near ubiquity of London dry gin, it does not have a protected status. EU laws around London gin are very specific on both the purity of the alcohol, 96% alcohol by volume initially, and then only from agricultural products, and it must also have a minimum ABV of 37.5% in the end product. If you are interested in the other provisions, check the show notes for a link to laws, but importantly, none of these provisions covers the distillation location. So you can happily distill London gin in Madrid or Luxembourg and still call it London gin. The dry is optional. As far as protected gins go in the UK, it will likely surprise you that there's only one: Plymouth Gin. While the distillation rules are very similar to those of London gin, they must be produced in the port town of Plymouth. It's not a surprise that Plymouth, with its links to the Navy, has famously good gin. At the moment, the only distiller is the Blackfriars Distillery that makes the famous Plymouth Gin. Aptly named indeed. One of my earliest reviews is of the Plymouth Distillery tour that I heartily recommend to anyone visiting the southwest of England with a few hours to spare. Further afield, another protected gin takes us to Germany. Despite my many travels across Germany, I only encountered Steinhager Gin last year. As part of a rather generous leaving gift, I was presented with a delightful bottle of 60-year-old Schlichter gin. Despite being a juniper-heavy gin, it has a much smoother taste than London Dry, and no citrus flavour at all. There are currently only 2 manufacturers in operation, but it's definitely a unique gin that is worth seeking out. The smoothness makes it drinkable on its own, or as a good base for the more ingredient-heavy, gin-based cocktails. Although I don't think I'd waste the 60-year-old variant on a cocktail, it's definitely worth enjoying on its own, as I'm doing in the bar right now. In more recent years, you will have seen a veritable boom in the production of gin. While G&Ts have never truly left us, and gin has been poorly maligned as the drink of the middle-aged, as unexciting. Since around 2010, the fast distilling process has led to quick innovation. You can distill a gin from the initial alcohol in around 8 hours, and so you can iterate varieties far faster than whiskey or any other spirit that requires aging. This has seen an inevitable uptake in gin drinking, as it can be flavoured fashionably, and there is plenty of it about. The G&T, which has never truly left us, has come back too, leading to a requisite boom in tonic varieties. There really is something for everyone in the gin market these days. Pairing a particular gin's flavours to a tonic can be quite the art. There are now a number of gin delivery services that will send you measures of different gins to try alongside verbose tasting notes, whether it be a gin that works well with tonic, a particular mix of rosemary and lemonade, or just best enjoyed over ice. The standard G&T can overpower the taste of a gin with all that quinine, so it is definitely worth investigating your palate with a small soupçon of a gin served over ice, or perhaps in a cocktail that brings the flavour to the fore. Which brings us to the Humble Martini. A perfect martini should be made by filling a glass with gin, then waving it in the general direction of Italy. Noel Coward. If you do want a cocktail to showcase your favourite gin, you can't go far wrong with the martini, traditionally a mixture of gin and vermouth that is stirred, not shaken, Mr. Bond. You can limit the vermouth to ensure that you can enjoy the taste of your unique, modern gin. Now, don't get me wrong, a gin and tonic is another excellent libation, but you need to carefully match that tonic to the gin. If you really want to bring the gin to the fore, the martini is the way to go. Although I suppose you could just drink neat gin, as we've discussed. I might recommend that you at least do that on the rocks, though. And at that point, you're surely just an olive away from an Noel Coward martini. Might as well hedge your bets and enjoy a martini mixed masterfully at the bar for you. I hope you've enjoyed this visit to the bar as I describe the history of a particular spirit in detail. Join me next time for your regularly scheduled programming, where I'll be discussing that very martini and how to make one. See you then. Dr. Wilko's Campaign for Better Beverages is a production of Tinker Tailor Soldier Sponge Productions. It was researched, written and produced by Dr. Wilko. The Gin was Drunk by Dr. Wilko. The music was George Street Shuffle, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3 by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. You can find the show notes at drwilko.org/podcast/25. You can support this podcast on Patreon via the show notes and the website, drwilko.org/Patreon. After all, someone's got to keep me in gin.